What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. For those of you who've been supporting the channel, commenting, watching the videos, I wanted to take a moment to tell you thank you very much for all of the support. I really do appreciate it. You guys have made this channel become one of the most resonating Gotham Knights communities out there on the internet. So shout out to all of you. Today we're going to be looking at a few things surrounding Gotham Knights. For those of you who don't know, the rating was apparently shown and then reverted. So they probably maybe made a mistake. They showed the rating as teen and then they drew that back. So it appears that we're going to have a teen rating. I think this way it allows for the game to have a little bit more in terms of sales and all of the above. But more than necessary, today we're going to be looking at some other aspects of the conversations going on the internet surrounding the combat. Those of you who are on the Video Game Fight School channel, you know combat is one of the more important aspects of our discussions here. And to this effect, I've been reading comments, just scouring the internet and watching just to see how people are taking the combat at its face value, providing suggestions, and maybe a few things on their wish lists. Now, to be honest, there are many different ideas that people have, but today we're going to be looking at two of them specifically. One of them is a counter system. A lot of people are asking if there's going to be some kind of a counter system in Gotham Knights. The answer to that is actually very simple. A few months ago, the developers put together a dev Q&A, and in there, people were asking if this counter system was going to be available in the combat. And for those of you who were following at that time, Jeff Eleanor mentioned that the counter system is going to be in a way where you as the player have specific moves to respond to enemy NPC attacks in order to, in quote, counter them. In terms of maybe a counter system like the QuickTime event from the Arkham games, that is not going to be available in Gotham Knights. Now, if you look at the Batgirl gameplay that IGN showed, that is a preliminary gameplay, basically showing the very first few minutes of the game. And so if you pay very close attention, you'll notice that Barbara is at level 1. So perhaps those moves had not yet been unlocked, and that's why you probably didn't see them in that gameplay sequence. I know there's an article or a report that says something about Gotham Knights is not the RPG where you start out as a weak character, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but you still have to unlock skills and abilities as you progress through the game. And it was obvious that all Barbara had in her toolset were quite basic. So until we see that, we're not necessarily going to know how those counter systems will work, but there are more showcases coming up where Patrick Redding mentioned that more skills, abilities, and a few other things will be showcased. So this is probably what we're going to be looking forward to in order for us to have that question answered. Another aspect too that people are talking about other than this counter system is some are comparing the dodge mechanics to the Spider-Man game. In fact, many people have said, I'm getting the Spider-Man vibes from this Gotham Knights game. And in my estimation, I think a lot of people are correct when it comes to that. The game seems to want to adopt some of the things that Marvel Spider-Man did adopt and implement in 2018. However, even if it's trying to implement some of those things, it kind of, in a sense, cuts itself off at some certain point because Marvel Spider-Man 2018 is actually much more closer in its combat to the Arkham games. In fact, the entire design from ground up can be compared almost button by button to the way the Arkham games work. If you look very closely at your controller scheme, you'll notice that in terms of combat, the Spider-Man game really does share a lot with the Arkham games. Yes, some buttons are switched around, but fundamentally, you're going to realize that those two combat systems are designed very similarly. In fact, in the case of Spider-Man, that free flow system, and yes, it is a free flow system, actually works so well for Spider-Man because of his abilities and his web swinging capabilities. One of my audience members and I were talking about the free flow system in the comment section, and they went ahead and told me how they picked up Spider-Man 2018 for the first time, and because of all the experience they had gathered from playing the Arkham games and other games that have some sort of a free flow system, it was easy for them to be very good at the Spider-Man game at a drop of the hat. And I think that's one of the reasons that many Batman players really did find the Spider-Man game somewhat of a pleasant experience as they kind of picked it up. But regarding these two bullet points that players are pointing out, which is possibly some kind of a counter system and some sort of the Spider-Man mechanic, I think what Gotham Knights is doing is a workable combat system that we have not necessarily seen in a full context. And I think this is something that a lot of players are going to have to just maybe give it a little bit more time so that the developers pretty much showcase what it is that they have. The biggest challenge nonetheless is even if they keep showcasing all of these things, as long as the player has not necessarily gotten their hands on the game game and on these systems, it's still going to be hard for the player to measure by just a visual representation. And this is why I still keep calling for a demo, because at the end of the day, the demo is pretty much something that the developers can control what it is that they want the players to see. It is also something that the players can also get engagement with and be able to experience the last phase of what a game can give you, which is game feel. You can see a game all you want, but until you actually play the game and feel the game, it's not necessarily going to resonate with you, especially an action game in any sense or any capacity. Because if you're maybe playing a shooter or maybe playing a melee combat game, all of those particular systems have a feel to them. Because whether we like it or not, we still have questions that we ask regarding any video game that we play. If you're playing a shooter, you wonder how the recoil feels, how the bullet sounds are, all of those different particulars that actually come with you experiencing a video game. If it's a melee combat game, you want to know if the animations have weight to them. Sometimes you can actually visualize that, you can see it from the gameplay. But at the end of the day, it's actually pretty different than when you're actually playing the game. One very big example that I usually like to use is God of War. When you're watching God of War, it really does provide you a solid action experience if you're watching the gameplay. But when you're playing it, that experience is heightened to a whole different level. Kratos is very animated. The camera closeness, the feel of the animations, his voice acting in the time where he's trying to do a power move, where he yells like a warrior, those things are quite accentuated when you're holding the controller, and sometimes you find yourself even jerking to the motions because that's the way the combat is designed to make you feel. So gameplay feel, more than anything, is what I think this overarching question is really about. Players want to see, in a sense, and when I say see, that is in air quotes, but players want to feel how this game is going to play and how it's going to work for them. But over time, I think we're going to get a platform where we can get much more details, where perhaps we can get a demo or a trial, and everyone can, in a sense, see for themselves how the game is going to play. Another really interesting aspect, and I wanted to use this to close the video, is the co-op gameplay. You see, from what we've been watching, we've seen a lot of single player and co-op gameplay at the same time, and it appears to me that there might be co-op specific takedowns and scenarios. This is also something that players would want to get a feel for as well, or at least know if you're limited to specific takedowns, whether you're in a co-op setting or in a single player setting, or if you can do those takedowns by yourself regardless, because those takedowns are actually really cool from the co-op side. I wonder if you as a player can set them up yourself and still do them nonetheless. And I think we're probably going to be getting some answers to these questions as time goes on. But anyways, these are my thoughts regarding these concerns that players are raising around the community. I would love to hear what it is that you think. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching the video. I really appreciate you guys a lot, and hopefully we'll talk very soon. Peace out.